the lecture here is entitled Against Immigration. Now, what exactly is immigration? Well, there's a definition from the gold standard of dictionaries, the Oxford English Dictionary. Immigration is the action of coming to live permanently in a foreign country. That's what it is. Now, the United States has by far the world's largest immigrant population. We hold about 1 out of 5 of all the world's immigrants. 20% of all the immigrants in the world are here in the United States. In absolute numbers, there has been at least 60 million immigrants who have arrived in the United States between 1965 and 2015. 65 million. That swaps the other big immigration period we had in our nation's history back in the 1880s through 1919, in which the Statue of Liberty was built in that period, welcoming the immigrants there in New York Harbor as they came in. Only 32 million immigrants came during that big time then. So our current immigration has swamped it. Swamped the immigration of the times of the Statue of Liberty. Now, immigration is one of the most important issues you can talk about because it affects every other important issue. Terrorism, crime, drugs, corruption, social services, Social Security, welfare, health care, public health and disease, public education, the environment, global warming, energy, our infrastructure, our economy, jobs and unemployment, the deficit, taxes, foreign policy, and trade with other countries, and our overall culture and values, and who our fellow citizens are going to be. Immigration is an extremely important issue, so the nation has to talk about it. Now, we are in the middle of an election season, 1 week to go for the election. Both presidential candidates have positions on immigration, and so it's a very topical topic here. Let me indicate what the two positions are of the candidates, how they oppose each other. Here's Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is in favor of an amnesty, a path to citizenship for people in the country illegally. So if you've been here, so you got in here illegally, she wants to waive that away so that you can become citizens. She doesn't want deportation unless it's for violent criminals. So if you come in here illegally, there will be no deportation. She's announced this, unless you're a violent criminal. She wants more Syrian refugees. Syria is in the midst of a chaotic conflict, a civil war. It's in the news every day. President Obama has already taken 10,000 refugees into the country from Syria. Hillary Clinton wants more. She doesn't think Obama has taken enough. She wants to increase that to 65,000 in her first year of office from Syria. And you may have heard about the WikiLeaks operation. They've been leaking, showing her all her emails. They hacked into her account. She gave a talk to wealthy donors claiming that her dream is open borders. Donald Trump, the Republican, opposes her on these scores. Number one, he's famous for wanting to build a wall on our southern border. He's offered no amnesty. He's offered no plan for path to citizenship for the people in this country illegally. He first came out saying he wanted to deport all the illegal immigrants. He's since backtracked on that. He definitely says he's going to deport all criminals and perhaps others as well. He wants no Syrian refugees anymore. He wants to end that program. And he's also famous. He initially said he wanted no Islamic immigration whatsoever. He's now scaled that down to suggesting he wants a suspension or an extreme vetting from countries that are compromised by terrorism. And by that he means certainly Islamic terrorism. So you got very different opposing positions on this immigration debate between the candidates. Now, I'm going to be arguing for a position that even Donald Trump hasn't advocated. I'm going to give arguments for the following position: an immigration moratorium, an end to all immigration, an end to it. Now, first I want to preface this by saying, surely you agree there's no absolute right to live wherever you want. I don't have a right to live in the White House. I'd love to. I don't have a right to live in Mecca or Medina, Saudi Arabia. Those two cities, holy cities to the Muslims, no unbeliever, non-Muslim is allowed in those precincts. I can't live there. I can't live in the Vatican City, the seat of the Pope. He's got a little city-state right there in Rome. But that's only occupied by people in the Catholic Church, the Catholic hierarchy. I can't live in Trump Tower just because I want to. I can't live on Star Island, even though that would be a nice place to live. I can't live in your backyard. I don't have an absolute right to live in your bedroom. Set up a little tent in there. People don't have an absolute right to live wherever you want. So there's no rights really at issue, I'm going to claim. And further, because there's no rights at issue, you now got to ask about what are the consequences, what are the costs and the benefits of immigration. I'm going to suggest the costs are severe and we should oppose it. My first argument is the overpopulation argument. We ought to prevent overpopulation. Now, preventing overpopulation, that requires ending immigration. Let me show why. China and India, number one and number two most populated countries in the world. They are considered overpopulated. The third country after China and India in terms of population, USA. We have 320 million people living here already. Have you been on the roads during rush hour in Miami? We already have enough people. We don't need any more. There's too many here already. Our population is growing, but this is mostly due to immigrants coming in and with their high fertility rates. They have more babies than people who are native born. Without immigration, the U.S. population would be relatively stable. Now, according to the latest projections for our population, by 2065, immigrants are projected to account for 88% of the U.S. population increase. 103 million people. 88%. That's close to 90%. 9 out of 10 future Americans, increasing the population of this country, will be immigrants and the children of immigrants. You're talking about overall, by 2065, an increase of 130 million people. That's the equivalent of adding another 3 states the size of California in population. California is the most populous state. Further, immigration allows other overpopulated countries to continue to overpopulate. Now we're getting lots of immigrants from China now. They project in the future The majority of immigrants will not be Hispanics, they'll be Chinese. Countries can continue to overpopulate because countries like the USA continue to take them in. So not only does this country get overpopulated, the world at large gets overpopulated. My second argument is the environmental argument. What are the effects of overpopulation? They're not good for the environment by any means. Now, we ought to protect our environment. Now, protecting our environment requires preventing immigration. So we ought to prevent it. We ought to end it. More people means more stress on the environment. You already have water shortages in California and the Southwest. There's too many people living there, and that's in part due, mainly due, to immigration in the Southwest. Topsoil is eroded, forests are cut down, land is cleared for homes and malls, schools and hospitals. The more people you let in. More water, more land will be taken from the Everglades here in South Florida. And the Everglades is already in crisis. You have urban sprawl, more pollution, more waste. We increase global warming. We have greater depletion of our natural resources and also of the world's resources too. And why is that? Because turning other people into energy-consuming Americans is terrible for the environment. Americans consume more of everything on this planet than anybody else. A child born in the United States will create 13 times as much ecological damage over the course of his or her lifetime than a child born in Brazil. Americans constitute 5% of the world population, 5%. But we consume 25% of the world's energy. A quarter of the world's energy consumed by Americans. We're only 5% of the population of the planet. If you care about the earth, you don't want to make even more people Americans. The economic argument. We ought to keep our economic costs down. Now, keeping economic costs down, well, that requires ending immigration. So we ought to end it. We've got 5% of unemployment in this country. That's around 6 million people want jobs, not enough jobs for them. Why are we importing more workers into this country? We don't have enough jobs as it is. We ought to preserve our current welfare state and our social services. But all those costs are going to go up with immigration. Public education costs go up. You've got to teach all these kids and these people coming in. New schools have to be built. New infrastructure has to be built. Hospitals have to be built. Energy utilities have to be built. More prisons have to be built. Spiraling health costs because lots of these immigrants are not insured. So who picks up the tab? You do, the taxpayer. Immigration will bankrupt our welfare state in the future, given the projection of how many more are going to come in. Immigrants have higher poverty rates than the native-born, so they drain more social services and welfare costs than native-born Americans. Every native-born American in this country has paid about $200 a year more in taxes because of immigration. And that's an average. Okay, if you're living in Wyoming, it's probably below that figure. If you're living in Miami, it's probably much higher than that figure. There's way more immigrants in Miami than in Wyoming. And then there's all kinds of, look what happens with our generous welfare services at the same time allowing generous immigration into this country. The Sun Sentinel in Fort Lauderdale last year ran a story. Immigrants, because of the family reunion policies of our immigration policy, they bring their elderly parents, their grandparents, great-grandmas into this country. They've never paid into the Social Security system, never paid in taxes to the welfare system, but you bring your elderly relatives, your elderly family in the country, and they get all the benefits of our services without ever having to pay the costs. In this country, we have birthright citizenship. If you are born in this country, you are automatically a citizen. So guess what? Guess what happens? Abuse. You remember the Zika scare that we had here in South Florida? People have been flying into this country pregnant with Zika babies so they can give birth in the U.S. to their Zika babies. So we pick up the tab. We've got this, amazing, medical science and technology here. We're generous when it comes to trying to help, impoverished poor people, especially with these types of disabilities. They won't get that back home, so they come here, have the baby here, that we're paying for. We should be doing the reverse. Instead, we need to reduce our costs, reduce our taxation, solve our own problems first, instead of importing more and new problems into the country. We ought to try to preserve the quality of life that we have. We ought to try to preserve workers' wages. Look, the more workers there are in the country, the more that drives down the salary or the wage you're going to get. It's just competition in the market. Immigration has totaled the wages of Native Americans by at least 2%, and that will get higher as more and more immigrants come in. Further, immigration increases inequality in our country. We ought to be preventing greater inequality in our country. So we ought to be preventing immigration. How does it increase greater inequality? Because notice, I just told you, as a fact, it reduces workers' wages. Who does that benefit? The owners, the capitalists, the 1% in this country. And indeed, the 1% gets richer and richer, and the 90% does not, gets poorer. In part because of immigration. What happens is we workers lose wages because of competition with other workers, immigrants coming into the country. The owners of the businesses, they reap all the benefits of that. It boosts their bottom line. They don't have to pay workers as much. What happens with immigration is that you have a transfer of money from you and me to the rich guys. We shouldn't be allowing that. To stop that, we need to end immigration. Further, because of this wage decrease that happens in this country, it ends up harming the worst off in our country the most. If you allow low-skilled, unskilled workers into the country, as most of our immigrants are, they're going to be competing with the low-skilled, unskilled workers here in this country. The worst off Americans end up getting the most competition, end up hurting the most in terms of their wages, end up getting hurt the most in terms of their jobs. And who are the worst off? It's as it turns out, the community most hurt is the black community. Don't we owe special protections to the black community to make sure they have access to jobs? But then that means it's required we end immigration. Next, let me discuss a culture argument. We ought to protect our culture. But protecting our culture requires ending immigration. So we ought to end it. Now let me give you some thought examples or evidence for the first premise that we ought to protect our culture. Look, multiculturalists want to say every culture should be respected and protected from pressure to change. And indeed, they get upset when other cultures end up having all kinds of pressure to change by outside or internal forces. For example, Tibet. Tibet now is under, strict control by the Chinese, the Han Chinese. You may have seen Free Tibet type of movements. The worry is Tibetan culture is being eliminated by the Han Chinese moving in. We have uncontacted Amazon tribes. Look, there are tribes in the Amazon living their Stone Age ways, and it's illegal to contact them. Why? Because when they contact the outside world, their culture ends up changing, gets eliminated, ends up getting wiped out. They end up adopting our ways, not preserving their culture. They get all kinds of external pressures. So you're supposed to leave their territory and habitats alone. You're not supposed to contact them so they can continue to preserve their culture. Apparently, cultures have a right to preserve themselves. Columbus Day was October 10th this month. Last month. Columbus Day has become controversial. Now there's many cities in this country, they've wiped out Columbus Day and changed it for Indigenous Peoples Day. Indigenous meaning, the Native Americans. Why? Well, the deal is Columbus was bad, had a bad influence, because he's the first European before the big settler and immigration wave in which we swamped the Native American Indians, and where are they left? They're on reservations, and it's nowhere near the culture that they have, nowhere near the Native American lifestyle they once had, because we swamped them out. And the Native Americans are pissed at that their culture was degraded and eliminated so much by sheer numbers of people. You see, people seem to think cultures have a right to preserve themselves. Well, that applies to American culture too. We're a culture. We've got our own values, democratic values, Western liberties and rights, first world culture and norms and attainment levels, low corruption relative to other countries in the world, an American way of life, a unique and distinctive culture. The very culture that accounts for our success. The very culture that makes immigrants want to come here. We ought to preserve it. And what that means is you've got to end immigration. Because the kinds of immigrants we are currently letting in don't share those types of values, the same values. Muslim immigration, for example, was an example in the debate between Clinton and Trump. Look, the vast majority of Muslims do not share your American values, do not share that, women have equal rights. They don't share that view. They don't share that gays should have equal rights. They do not share that view. They do not share the view that people have free speech and freedom of religion. They do not share that view. They do not share your view of Western liberties and Western rights. They don't. Okay? The vast majority of Muslims are anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish. So you want to preserve our, egalitarian, equalitarian values in this country? Why would you want to bring in loads of Islamic immigrants, loads of third world immigrants who do not share your Western values? If you want to preserve the country, you got to end immigration. I've given you the projections. It's going to be huge in the future, given our current policies. An assimilation argument. We ought to assimilate the immigrants we already have. We got 60 million. And assimilating the immigrants we already have requires that we end immigration. And you don't have to take my word that immigrants are not assimilating. The immigrants themselves say this. The Pew poll, a very respected survey institution, polled immigrants a large share of the foreign-born themselves, 55%. The majority of immigrants in the country say that immigrants to the U.S. want to hold on to the customs of their country. They want to hold on to the customs of the third world countries. They want to hold on to the customs of their Muslim countries. That's what the majority of immigrants say about themselves. The percentage of immigrants who cannot speak English proficiency has risen since 1980, the earliest data I was able to find. It's risen to 50% now. 50% of immigrants cannot speak English proficiently. That is, they can't communicate in English. Now, immigrants will not assimilate if immigration continues as it is, because there's no pressure to. If you're able to live in a community in which you don't have to change your ways to get around, you don't have to assimilate to do what you want to do, you will not. They want the majority to keep their ways. If there's no pressure, they will keep their ways. In fact, you're seeing that in Europe now. Europe has had a huge refugee and migrant problem. Millions of migrants from the Middle East and North Africa have poured into Europe, and they have now formed their own communities, even no-go zones. The police and the government forces cannot go in. They hold up there, setting up their own communities, their own enclaves, in which their own laws, rules, and customs hold sway. We should not allow that to happen here. Another argument is the unity argument. We ought to seek, as a country, as a society, unity. But unity requires that we prevent or end immigration. You see, diversity kind of equals division. Immigration causes division and divisiveness, lack of trust, disrupts a sense of community, introduces new groups with resulting animosity between them. Different groups are different. And people who are really different don't get along with each other. They don't get along with each other as well as people who are similar or are the same. Immigration introduces new differences, more differences, and even exacerbates the ones we already have. Today, as I'm speaking to you, in Paris, the immigrants and the migrants from the Middle East, from North Africa, they're rioting and fighting each other in the streets of Paris against each other. The immigrants don't like each other. The Syrian doesn't like the Moroccan. The Moroccan doesn't like the Sudanese. So they're warring with each other in the streets. Immigration exacerbates, increases divisiveness and conflict. In our American Southwest, there's the movement known as La Raza, also the Reconquista, in which lots of people want to reclaim the American Southwest from Mexico. They want to turn it into North Mexico, or they call it Aztlan. I've never heard it pronounced A-S-T-L-A-N, Aztlan. And my last argument will be the security argument. We ought to protect our security. But protecting our security requires that we end or stop immigration. Why? Well, let me take two items, crime and terrorism. When it comes to crime, 33% of criminals, according to the government, are foreign-born. 33%. 1/3 of all the criminals in the country are foreign-born. Now, what's their percentage of the population? 13%. 13% of the U.S. population, 33% of the criminals in our prisons. They are overrepresented in our prison. They have higher crime rates in our prisons. If you want a secure country, if you want less crime in this country, you ought to end immigration. What about terrorism? You know the source of terrorism in this country. It's Islamic. And the major Islamic terrorism that has occurred in this country has been by immigrants or children of immigrants. San Bernardino in California, Syed, Farouk, Tashfeen Malik, immigrants. The Orlando Gay Club massacre here in Florida. Omar Mateen, either an immigrant or a son of an immigrant. The Boston Marathon bombers, Dzhokhar and Tamerlan Tsarnaev, also Muslims. A couple of months ago, there's a Somalian community in Minnesota. Obama has moved all kinds of Somalian refugees and put them in the middle of Minnesota, so that there's a huge Somalian community in Minnesota. There's constant problems. They're constantly catching in stings Somalians trying to join ISIS, trying to do Islamic terrorism in this country. One was successful. His name was Dahir Adan. He went into a mall in Minnesota, started slashing and stabbing people right and left. Well, first he asked them if they were Muslim. Are you a Muslim? No. Okay. You a Muslim? Yeah. I'm a Muslim. All right, he wouldn't stab, he wouldn't slit your throat then. Europe, I said, Europe has a massive refugee and immigrant problem from Islamic North Africa, Islamic Middle East. They also have a massive immigrant crime problem, massive immigrant rape problem, massive immigrant terrorism problem. Every day, look to the world news. Every day, you'll see a headline to that effect. All right. What's my conclusion? The conclusion is obvious. Keep America livable. Stop immigration. Keep America sustainable. Stop immigration. Keep America beautiful. Stop immigration. Keep America united. Stop immigration. Keep America safe. Stop immigration. Keep America America. Stop immigration. Stop immigration. Stop immigration. Thank you for hearing this side of the debate. All right, we have a microphone. Charles, would you be so kind as to go to the mic? Make sure the mic is turned on. If you have any counter-arguments, any questions, criticisms, I'm a philosopher, and I love the debate.
Here we go. So you completely agree. Completely agree with everything. Yeah.
You said you don't have a right to live in the White House, in the Pope, and Trump Tower, all that.
Right.
If you run for president, you can live in there. You do have a right to run for president, assuming you were born. You're 35 years of age and all that. And in Trump Tower, you can pay rent, so you do have a right to live there. So if the immigrants come here and they pay their taxes, they can live here too. I'm not sure what percentage it is, but I'd say 60% of scientists come for Silicon Valley. They come, America pays them to do research in this country, and they stay here. So that also is a benefit of immigration.
Okay. So your first point is, he's got 2 points. First, he wants to say that there is a right to live wherever you want. There isn't an absolute right to live wherever you want, and your examples don't show that. What you've shown is that you have a right to live in the White House if you win the election. That's not an absolute right to live in the White House. You have to meet a rather stringent condition in order to live in the White House, okay? Further, you got to be native born in this country. You got to be of a certain age in this country. You got to be over the age of 35, okay? And you got to win the election. So it's not an absolute right. It's not like, and notice, I can't win the election for president. I don't have this right to live in the White House. I don't have the right to live in Trump Tower. Why? Because I don't have the money. I don't make the money. It's not an absolute right. It's only if I meet certain kind of conditions. Now notice, there's other conditions in which that I would never be able to. I mentioned, the Vatican City, and I mentioned also the city of Mecca. Those are religious enclaves. I'm never converting. I'm never going to become a Catholic. I'm never going to convert to Islam. So I have no right to do that. And I don't have a right to live in your room, set up a tent in your bedroom, unless you give me permission. So I don't have this right to be there that other people cannot deny me. When you say that you have an absolute right to something, you're saying other people cannot deny you that for any reason. In all your examples, other people can deny me those things for reasons, because I don't meet the criteria that they want. Yes. Oh, he had another point. Let me answer his other point. So that was the absolute right bit. The other thing you talked about was the scientists. I don't know if that figure is correct or not. Okay, right. So there's a certain percentage, but we do attract research scientists from other countries. Okay, that's no reason to say that they have to live here. You can work here, teach at the university, but that doesn't mean we make you a citizen. And notice the kind of thing that you're talking about here. What do you think the percentage is of world-famous research scientists among the immigrants that we let in this country? What do you think the percentage is? Of all the immigrants in this country? I'm saying as a percentage of all immigrants. Okay, so notice, your point does not apply to the vast majority of the immigration that we have in this country. And there's no reason why they have to become citizens just to work at our universities, work in our labs. There's no reason why they have to actually become citizens. Immigration is that you go to live permanently in this other country, and become a citizen. Okay, now I had another question in the back.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm short.
This is my job.
Yeah.
I'm not doing my job.
Yeah, that's okay. So I came late, but I'm not really for your argument because I do have like immigrant workers who work in my house, and then I think they're very good workers. But I also
Okay, I'm not catching that. You're talking a little bit fast. So,
I'm not really like I don't really agree with you. Like
Right.
how you're against it, but I'm also not really for it too because I have a lot of immigrant workers and I think they're very hard workers, like in my opinion. But I also think that like it causes like too much population, like too many people coming to the U.S.
did you hear that was one of my arguments, the overpopulation
Right,
argument? Did you
right.
catch that one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
And now you say that they're hard workers. Some of them are, but they also, there's a greater percentage of immigrants on our social services and welfare system than the native born. So while you may be right, there are some significant percentage of hardworking immigrants, other ones are not, that they are in fact living off of the welfare system.
Right.
Further, I mean, are you saying that Americans are not hardworking?
No, they are.
They are.
They
No.
are. But
Okay, now I don't know if you heard this. You said you came in late. Look, there are 6 million Americans who want to work,
Yeah.
but there's not enough jobs for them.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So you might say, well, some of the immigrants, some significant portion of the immigrants we let in, they're hard workers. Yeah, but I got hard workers that want to work, that can't find jobs, and one of the reasons is we've got too many workers in the country, and the big reason for that is we let in millions and millions of immigrants every year.
Right, but I think, but they're coming to America because it's like, it's a free country, but I guess, like in their perspective, because they're not very like maybe educated as us.
Right?
Yeah, so like,
Okay, yeah, I mean, I agree. Living in America has benefits.
right,
Okay? That's why they come here, and that's why we want to stay. I mean, the percentage of Americans who emigrate to other countries is low. They want to stay here.
right,
All right, so there's no question that it's nice to be here, there's benefits. But that doesn't mean you have a right to come here. Just like there would be lots of benefits, I would love to live in the White House.
yeah.
But all kinds of benefits to that. But that doesn't mean I have a right to live there.
No, I think it means that immigrants do have a right to live there. I mean, but if they're not U.S. citizens, because I heard you say that if you're not a U.S. citizen, you can't live in the White House. Is that what you said earlier?
No, I'm saying
sorry.
that
Okay.
simply that I would like or that it would benefit me to live in a place. That does not mean I have a right to live in that place.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay?
Yeah. Mhm.
So I do not question that they have good reasons or motivation to
Right. Okay.
citizen. The question is, do they have a right? Do we do anything wrong if we say, no, I'm sorry, we've got enough people, we can't let you in?
Right.
No right is violated
Okay.
on that ground.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
You would agree?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Yes. Would you go up to the mic?
Afternoon, my name is Gabriel, and I totally want to be unbiased on both pros and cons of against immigration, but I do have one question, and I really want to understand a little bit more. You quoted diversity can often result in division. Can you once again explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Diversity means differences. Okay? Would you agree that people who are really different from each other, they are more likely to have division between them, for there to be divisiveness between them, than people who are similar?
It's true. Yes.
Okay. So if, as we are, allowing lots of different people from all over the world into our country, okay, that you are going to be increasing the differences in our population, and therefore increasing the divisiveness, the division, the conflicts in our country. And the prime example is, as a warning to us all, what is going on in Europe. North African, Middle Eastern Muslims have flooded into Europe. bringing their own values, their own culture, their differences into Europe. They do not respect women's rights. So there has been an amazing increase in rapes and sexual assaults on the native European women by these immigrants and migrants let in.
So despite people now in the United States accepting diversity, there's a higher chance of racism between cultural differences?
I'm saying, look, on the one hand, we say, we try to be accepting of diversity. What I'm saying, just as a fact, while we want to be accepting of diversity, and we think it's good to be accepting of diversity, when you really look at what happens, there's divisions between us because of diversity. For example, the overwhelming number of black Americans in this country will vote for Clinton. The overwhelming number of Hispanics in this country will vote for Clinton. That's because there's differences in what these different groups, ethnic groups, want to see happen. Okay? So you've got this big division, on the one hand between Democrat and Republican, that is in part ethnic driven. So that's just one example.
Right.
And then you have them, while we want to celebrate diversity, they want to keep their ways. So again, with the Muslim immigration we have here, Muslims now want to call for Sharia law in their own communities. Not to live by the laws of the United States, but to live by the laws of Islam in their own communities. Women will have to be covered. There won't be equality for the women. Gays will not be tolerated. There might be draconian punishments for infractions, and so on. Perhaps polygamy. All right, they want to preserve their ways. So if you have an immigrant community that does not want to assimilate, at least the majority does not, according to them, and they are highly different, I foresee great divisiveness and conflict in the future. Compatible cultures and ways of life. If one group is not going to assimilate to the other, and you don't want to assimilate to Muslim culture, right?
Yeah.
Then there's going to be conflicts. And that's exactly in Europe.
Thank you for
Okay,
for answering.
thank you. Huh? No immigration. Why is that the answer to that? Well, because it allows people to assimilate. We had a huge immigrant wave in the late 1800s. From the 1880s to 1919, huge wave of immigrants from Southern Europe, Germany, Poland, Italy, and so forth, that area. In 1920, laws were changed for immigration. Restrictions, drastic restrictions on immigration from 1920 to 1965. Very little, a trickle. That allowed, I guess I quoted the figures, the 32 million immigrants from different cultures to assimilate to the American culture. Because we weren't continuing to allow these communities to form their own enclaves, their own areas in which, their own culture would be dominant and they would not assimilate. So that allowed them to assimilate. So now German Americans, they're just Americans. Italian Americans, they're just Americans. Irish Americans, they're just Americans. That needs to happen here. We have 60 million immigrants. Let's cut it off, allow them to assimilate. And not only does that make us more unified, less divisive, it's also keep the population down. Immigrants are generating the overpopulation and therefore generating all the problems, environmental problems, resource problems because of overpopulation. Yes?
Okay. So I've been looking over and reading all your points.
Yeah.
And so do you support the wall for Trump? I have a couple things, by the way. Do you support the wall, even though that most illegal immigrants come over leftover visas?
Yes, because that will at least reduce the problem. I also would say we got to do something about those leases, those visas, I should say.
Would you consider the visas would be more prevalent than a wall?
I don't know the absolute numbers, okay? I mean, you are saying this to me. I don't know if that's true. I have to look at that first, and then I can judge. What I do know is there's been a surge over the border. There's been a surge over the border in the last several months because on the one hand, Clinton's come out to say she's going to give an amnesty. There won't be any deportation if you're not a violent criminal. So on the one hand, you have all kinds of would-be immigrants now. They want to come over, and they are pouring over the border now in the Southwest. The Immigration Service is saying this because they think if Clinton's elected, they're in. Further, the others who are worried about Trump winning are like, we got to get in now before the wall gets built. So I do know that there has been a rush because of our election on the border. So is the visa problem a worse problem? Perhaps you're right, perhaps you're not. I do know the southern border is also a problem.
When you talked about terrorist acts like the San Bernardino ones and the Orlando shootings,
Yeah.
even in the Orlando shootings, it's kind of almost like a hate crime because he was gay himself.
He wasn't gay. That turned out to be false. The FBI looked into all those leads. The guy was not on gay apps. The guy wasn't a gay person, didn't have gay relationships. All the stories and the gossip that you heard turned out to be false. So he is anti-gay. Why is he anti-gay? Because the Quran is anti-gay. It's right there in the Quran. You know, the only place in the world in which gays are put to death are Islamic countries.
And you're absolutely against immigration. Like, no one should come over and live here, right? 100%.
I think that's the most fair policy.
You don't think
If you
that-
say other things, then you're going to have people claiming, oh, there's some type of discrimination going on. So to not even enter that type of debate, no immigration at all, a moratorium.
You don't think that people meet the specs of like being educated and assimilating and have American ideal values, they cannot live here and be with us?
Okay, I'm following this,
Like
this point.
if they assimilate, have American values or equal values, and are educated, do you think they should have the right to live here, or not the right to live here, but?
I mean,
they
you're
should
saying if
live
they're
here?
already here or something? Or
Or
they
like-
want to come in, they say, Nunder, I promise to assimilate, okay, go accept American values, et cetera, et cetera. Is that your idea?
Yeah.
What do I say? I say, we've got too many people. We don't need any more.
But don't you think overpopulation is for like every country, not just our country, but it's happening everywhere?
Yeah, but why does that mean we shouldn't do anything about it? That just means we should do all the more about it. Because if other countries become overpopulated, that's even more pressure on them to come here for a better life. Right?
Don't you think that will cause conflicts in the future?
What will cause conflicts in the future?
Anti-immigration laws? Don't you think more countries will be mad at us and will cause more wars because of it?
Other countries don't allow the immigration we do. All right, they're going to be mad at us. All we can say to them is, you do the same thing. We're the ones who are so generous with immigration. Do you think Mexico has the same immigration policies as we do? No. Mexico deports way more immigrants than we do. Way more. No other, except for Western countries. There's something with Western countries. America, Europe, okay, Canada. We're like, come on in, come on in. I mean, we don't care what happens. Other countries are like, no way. Israel doesn't allow immigration. You know how hard it is to immigrate into China? Japan allows hardly any immigration. Why? The Japanese, I mean, it's so weird. The Japanese, they want to keep Japan Japanese. Can you imagine?
Thank you.
And don't you think they have a right to? It seems so. If you grant other cultures a right to preserve themselves, certainly the Japanese do. And by the way, you know, the Japanese islands are small. They got a lot of people. Yes? Yeah. No, as I tried to show, we don't need to do that. We just need to end immigration. Right, because they have over 1 billion people. If you got 1 billion people, a lot of babies, right? So that's why, I mean, there might still be this overpopulation, but they have recently scaled that back from the one child. There's been a recent change. So they must have figured out that the demographic trends are getting better and they don't have to be so strict. So I would say, look, Americans would cry, and they think about the Chinese policy. They say, look, that's a violation of your right to have kids, all right? Your right to have a family that you want. Why violate Americans their right to have families, the size that they would like? Why deny them, violate that? Only one for you. When all we would have to do is to say to non-Americans, you can't come in. We're full. Right. Yeah, and I cited you figures. We do not have this overpopulation problem. 90% of the projected population increase to 2065 will be due to immigration. That's the solution. Yes, I got time for one last question here. Go ahead, sir.
I just wanted to say that I do recognize some of your arguments are
Yes.
valid, but I just think some of them are founded on false equivalency.
Sure.
Especially the one where you say that Islamic immigration comes with anti-homosexual values.
Yeah.
When I think that you're ignoring a large section of the American population, which might not take action against homosexuals, but when we see people who picket outside of soldiers' funerals with signs that have racial epithets like "God hates fags," and
Right.
that hate exists
The
in our
Westboro
country.
Church.
The Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah.
When we see Americans like Jerry Falwell say that 9/11 was done to the United States due to our allowing of homosexual marriage,
Right.
that is not brought in by immigration. Those are native-born citizens who hold those beliefs in high
Yeah.
regard.
Do you think that those Native Americans are wrong?
Oh, I'm not taking a stance here. Like I'm not gonna inflict my personal opinion on them. But I'm just saying that your argument is false.
Wait,
You're
wait,
saying
wait. Okay. If you think he's not willing to take a position, if you think gays should be treated equally, then you're going to say of those Native Americans, native-born Americans, who think they should be discriminated
no,
against, you're going to say that they're wrong.
I condemn what they say, but
Okay.
your argument is that they're bringing in those values, but they
let-
already exist in this country.
Let me answer you, sir, okay? So, you say they're wrong, okay? Do you admit that anti-homosexual animus has declined over the years in this country? You must say so.
No, I don't say so.
Oh, my Lord. There
Well, I
used to
do
be
believe.
laws-
I
Okay,
do believe
look,
that violent
look.
action has decreased. I don't think that.
Charles,
those
I
facts
need
are wrong.
control on the mic a little bit here, okay, so I can get my rebuttal in, okay? There used to be laws that would send gays and homosexuals to jail, to prison. There used to be laws in which gays could be fired for their jobs. There used to be laws in which gays could not adopt children. There used to be laws in which gays could not marry. All that has changed. There has been a reduction in homosexual animus in this culture, okay? You mentioned the Westboro Church. They are a small extremist sect of less than a dozen people, okay? Now, when you go to the Islamic world, the majority, they come out with polls. They poll the Islamic world. The majority of Muslims in the world think that being gay is a sin and is bad, and think being gay is punished at percentages far higher than anything here in America. So, if your concern is with the protection of the LGBT community, the last thing you want to do is let in millions of Muslims.
I think you misunderstand what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you're talking about laws. That's trivial. I'm saying that the values that you say that by what you're saying that America has pro-homosexual values. When I'm saying they exist inherently in the United States, and you're saying that bringing in more Muslim
I'm saying
immigrants.
it's obvious that now the majority view is that gays should be treated equally. It's obvious now, okay? And that shows with the percentages of the public opinion polls. All right, so are you pointing out, look, Nunder, there still are segments of our society, our American society, that have an animus against gays. You are right, sir. You are right. That percentage is far lower than in other parts of the world. Far lower. In fact, animus against gays is the majority view in the majority of the planet. If you want to preserve American equalitarian values, you don't want to let in people from those places. You want to stop immigration, okay? Thank you very much. I've got to end it here. It only goes until 1 o'clock. I thank you for your question. Thank you all for listening to this side. You are a pleasant audience. Have a great day.